Brucham Abon b'Shem Migsheter, like the welcome of the Taya Choshev Oilam Baruch Hashem. We see everybody Gesundheit, Freiligkeit. We're starting a new frishes man Chodesh Elul. We have the schus to have us again every Sunday. Rabbi Smishli to give the important topic about Shidduchim, what you're allowed to say, what you're not allowed to say, what you have to say. And this time opportunity, we like to wish a Mazel Tov for Rabbi Smith, the Chassan of this week. We shall tell you Mitzlachas. We allow a Simcha v'Nachas. Doiri Tishoim v'Racham bin Adiyat Kesher Shal Kyoma. With a lot of Simchas and Shidduchim by alle Yidden Gesundheit. Rabbi Smith Shlita.
Say Reb Chaim Shulevitz, when he was marrying off his youngest child, he called a Talmud who was an elder bacha, and he goes, you wonder, what am I thinking? I'm marrying off my last child. He said, I'm thinking of you. That was his Gewaldige Nesias oil. By the height of his simcha, he's thinking of someone else. Well, this is not my last child, and I'm certain very far from Reb Chaim Shmulevitz's level of Avos Yisrael. But I was thinking, I just went through, we'll go through it. I just finished the parasha of Shidduchim with one of my children, and I realized that sometimes one of the most challenging parts of the Kasha Zivugim Kikriyas Yamsuf is when people have questions. For example, I'll give you a simple example. We had the child in the yeshiva, one of the bachim was a Metzuyin Gadol Moed, but as a young child he had Yana Machla, and he had obviously many years of remission, and there was not a trace of it. Now he's holding by the parish of Shidduchim. Does he have to disclose that information? I mean, no family will even start with him, even though he's a Metzuyin, because why, what are any trouble for? Maybe he should not say anything, especially it looks okay. We had a question where someone told me, you're allowed to lie when it comes to age, or better yet, you're mechuyev to lie. Now, the Torah says you're not allowed to lie, so a chiyuv to lie, we have to clarify, is that true? Or there's a problem in the family, there's a divorce in the family, there's a shalom bayis issue. Now, if you notice, the question is not about a third party, someone that knows about this. Does he have to go and disclose the information? Today's sugya is when the boy or girl or the parents of the boy or girl are aware of certain problems. When do they have to volunteer the information? When are they mechuyev to? When are they not supposed to? And as we'll see, there are a host of questions that, again, the boy or girl or the parents are aware of. Is there any time they're mechuyev to share the information? Is shtika yafa, is that the right approach? Now, you must realize that we're talking about a very serious shayla. Sometimes it could be gnevas das, if you don't say. Sometimes it could be the issa of ainoah, fooling someone. And at times, by not disclosing information, it could be an emesa kedushay toyas. I know someone who was married for a few hours, literally. What shot? He got married, and after the chassan he came home and he saw his wife had, and I quote his lashon, a medicine chest of different medicines. He had no idea anything about it, and she was obviously very seriously ill. And he asked people, that, why didn't anybody tell me? He goes, no, we don't talk lashon hara. And the Rabbanim said he has such a strong case that he probably doesn't need a get even. He could demand all the mammonis back and doesn't need a get. There was a mekach tois. I mean, there were serious flaws that no one told him. Besides that, again, as we know, the Mesil Sasharim points out that the Torah doesn't just say don't lie, but stay away from lying. So could it possibly be that you're allowed to lie for a shidduch? And even if you don't say anything, if you don't do anything, but again, withholding information could be a question of ainoah and mekach tois. But then again, you have to get married. Imagine a person has a problem, and it really doesn't impact the marriage, but there's something wrong. If you'll say something, there goes the idea. No one will even consider you. And what I found more serious of a problem is when you do say something, it travels and gets worse and worse. And then it becomes from a little problem to a serious problem. But the question is, so what is the right direction? A person has to get married, and very often by disclosing information that ruins any chance. Also, I saw, and this the Kleiser Magen Tshuva in Ebenezer Simon Tezvav points out, if you do have to disclose information, so ein ladav asayf. After all, everybody has some chesroinus. How do you draw the line? How do you decide what's information that you have to share, what you don't have to share? And the emes is, there's another factor. Very often you could say, listen, the other party, if you really wanted to know about this, you should have done your homework. People do very extensive research. If you didn't look into it, if you didn't inquire, you didn't show interest, why should I tell you? If you don't care, why should I care? And the emes of the Chafetz Chaim in Mechilas Tziurim Ois Vav has a similar approach. He says, if someone is not a Talmid Chacham, and you know it, don't go tell the other party, oh, that boy you're considering, he's not a Talmid Chacham. Because they could have inquired on their own, they could have fahered him, or asked someone to faher him, and if they didn't, then Iyud Afsar Anafshe. So we definitely see, if the other party doesn't do any research, it's their fault. But the problem is there are some chesroinus that are kept secret, and no one wants to find out. No one's supposed to find out. And you can't find out. So the question is there an obligation to share information? Is there a heter to lie? Is it true, Hainu the Amri Inshi, that for Shidduchim you're allowed to lie? Or like someone told me, I found this in earlier sources, Shatchin is the Rashi Tevis, Sheka Doiva, and Kesef Noitel. He lies and makes money on the deal. Is that true? So as you see, we have quite a challenging agenda. Mitzad Echad, we're talking about a potential Issa of Sheker, Genevas Das. Ben Yonis says it's worse than Geneva. Oino'o, and Mekach Tois. And there are three possibilities. Outright lying is one possibility. Number two, not to lie, not to say a word, but you hide something. Lamashal, someone asked me, he was getting older, and he wanted to dye his hair black. He wouldn't say he's 20, but he looks like he's 20. So that wouldn't be sheker, but that's outright genevas das. He is being proactive and doing something to fool the other party. And then the third level is just shev al tasa. You don't lie, you don't do anything misleading, but you keep the information confidential. You don't tell the other party the problem that you had. And the truth is, every question in Shidduchim is a question of dairis. I mean, there's a famous Yerushalmi in Bava Kama Ches Zayin, and the Chafetz Chaim and Daled Yud Beis quotes it, that if someone talks bad about a mishpacha, ein lei mechila yulamis. And the truth is, Rabbi Yaakov in Shar Tshuva, Gimel Reish Ches explains, because if you talk about an individual, so you harm the individual, you could ask him mechila. If you talk about a family, you hurt the family forever. People won't have shaykhs to them, people won't be meshadach with them. You can't ask mechila from dairas that never happened because of you. If a person ruined the shidduch, he might have affected dairas. You can't ask mechila from dairas that didn't exist because of you. So shidduchim questions are always a question of dairas. And the truth is, I was indeed afraid to talk about this subject, but I think at least we could present the issues, and a person should follow the wise advice of Asei L'charav. But I think the first step is, it's not a question of yashris or ethics, it's a question often of nefashis. So the emphasis is al pi seichel, al pi svara. It's the old klal that the ends don't justify the means. You want to make a shidduch? That's true. Good. But are you allowed to do an aveira to help make a mitzvah? How could a person think by doing the wrong thing, he'll end up doing a mitzvah? It just doesn't seem right. The ends don't justify the means. Or you want to use a more yeshivish term, mitzvah bob aveira. You can't do an aveira to get a mitzvah. But especially regarding shidduchim, the Gemara in Moed Katan that Yud Chesam at Beis that we find in Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim, mi Hashem isha leish. This is the oldest truth. Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim, shidduchim is biyad Hashem. The Rebbeinu Shloim is still the master mezaveg. I saw in the Sefer Ma'aseh Ish Chelik Aleph Amud Reish Yud Beis, the Chazon Ish said, although we see today a terrible hest upon him, but there's times that we see Hashgacha pratis b'chush, be'einu v'chush, and that is when it comes to Shidduchim. And anybody who is Zayich to make Shidduchim sees the unmistakable Yad Hashem through that seems to just really direct the Shidduch. So here's the point. Something that's so much beyond Hashem, do you think the Baruch Shem needs your help? Or better yet, does the Baruch Shem need your help with doing something that's less than honest? And Taka, I saw Reb Chatzkel Levenstein's quote in the Sefer Moif Sadar Amad Lametes, who was very upset when people do things that are less than honest regarding a Shidduch. He says, this doesn't make sense. It's something that we realize that everything's beyond Hashem. Chalila to think that by doing something crooked, you're going to make a Shidduch. Especially to lie. You know, the Chazon Ish could not tolerate the word sheker. If someone said sheker, he say, zog nisht emes. Because by him, sheker, the word sheker was nivel peh. It's the very antithesis of old Yiddishkeit. Sheker? Okay, we're not in that madrega. But at least to have an aversion to lie, Torah says tirchak. But there's another problem with lying or concealing information. And I saw this in a wonderful sefer, Hashidduch, Amud Reish Gimel, quotes of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that he says, when people fool others in a shidduch, in other words, one mechutin doesn't tell the other mechutin, or the boy doesn't tell the girl, etc. We're not talking about outsiders, but the mechutanim don't share information, is a sakana gedola in shalom bayis. Because eventually they find out, and they have a taina, how could you not tell me? And he says, the thing that destroys the shidduch is not the chesaron, but it's the fact that you violated my trust. You didn't tell me. How could you not tell me? And the Rebbe says this is the Ramban. The Ramban in Parashat Vayetze on the pasuk Vayar Hashem Kisnu Aleya. Zog the Heilige Ramban. You have to Ramban to say this. Why did Yaakov hate Leah? Because Leah fooled him. She didn't disclose her real identity. So you're talking about Yaakov Avinu had a sinner because Leah fooled him. What should the average person say? I also saw Rabbi Yashiv, the same point. He says, if you don't share information, he says, very often that's the biggest stira to Shalom Bayis. And remember, I found a much earlier source, the Sefer Chassidim Simetov Kuf Zayin, written by one of the Rishonim, Yehuda Chassid. A person should not hide chesronis of his children when it comes to shidduch. Because he says, because if not, they'll say, how come I didn't know this? How could you not tell me? And they'll call it a kedushay tois. Now, the word kedushay tois is a very frightening word. That means it was never a kedusha in the first place. So in other words, besides that it might not be right, it's not the wise thing. I guess I could quote the adage, crime doesn't pay. First of all, lying could be wrong, and also it doesn't pay. But then again, you hear people say this story and this heta. So we have to look to our Urim V'Tumim, our GPS, Kaviyachol, our Torah Kedosha, and let's see if there are any sources in Torah Nevi'im on Halacha that yes, there is a heta to lie for a shidduch. So it comes to mind right away, one of the first Shadchanim in history, Eliezer Eved Avram, who was no simple person. He was a very prominent person. And you look in Chumash, Rashi, you look in the Shloh and Parshas Chayesara, the Malbim, they all learned the Psukim how Eliezer used such cunningness and such trickery to deal with Lavan. Rashi already says, he first gave the Nizamim to Rivka, and when he told the story to Besuel, he changed it because he was afraid. And again, the Shloh has a whole shtickle in Sefer Shloh and Parshas Chayesara. The Malbim has a brilliant shtickle. You'll learn Hilchas Shadchanim from Eliezer, how careful he was, how he did things with great chokhmah. No, so you see, the first shidduch in history involves a lot of mirma. But of course it's not a raya. Because Eliezer was dealing with a bandit whose name was Lavan. The second name was Arami. So Lavan had to follow the Pasuk in Tehillim, Im Ikesh Tispatol. When you're dealing with a crook, you have to act like a crook. Otherwise, you end up losing everything. And the truth is, the Heilige Chafetz Chaim in Siyurim, Soif, Oiz Vav, has the same approach. And this is a Psak of Chafetz Chaim. Let's say you know that Mechutin A is promising and he will not keep his promise. So as an outsider, you should go tell Mechutin B, hey, this fellow's a ganef. Says the Chafetz Chaim, first find out about Mechutin B. Because if he's also a ganef, sagt the Chafetz Chaim, Yotze Zeh B'Zeh. Good, Matzah Minasavida, it's a good Shidduch. They cheat each other. And the way the Chafetz Chaim seems to write, even if one side is cheating more than the other side, don't get involved. Because they're ganef, let them do what they want. So there's definitely a concept, if you're dealing with a crooked person, so let things go. So again, it's hard to bring a raya from Eliezer Eved Avram, who was dealing with a Lavan Arami, to a regular, normal Shidduch, where there's no trickery. You know you have a chesaron, maybe you have to say. So what is the chayra amakar for lying is two halachas, but before you apply this, make sure you learn the sugya properly. In Choshen Mishpat, Reish Samach Dalet Siv Zayin, the Mechaber quotes, if someone has a child that's getting older, he could go over to a big shatchen and say, I'm going to give you triple your amount for your fee if you read my daughter a shidduch, and it works out. And the shidduch works, all you have to do is give the regular fee. Why? Because there's a chiyuv. Everybody has to try to read shidduchim. So basically, you would just encourage him to do his chiyuv. A second halach, this is an Even Ezer Kuf Beis Sif Vav. There's a shidduch that came to an impasse because no one wants to be an arei for the ksuba. So the mechaber, based on the Gemara, it's a Ferish Gemara, Daf Chav Gimel, in Krisus, a person that signed as a co-signer doesn't have to really be there if need be. Why? Because everybody is mechuyev to make sure shidduchim work. Now again, before you apply this, you have to learn the sugya when it applies. But here we see how important it is that they make shidduchim work. However, as we just said, that's different. Because there, as an outsider, we all have a chiyuv to get involved. You know, the shidduchim crisis is not the problem of the singles, it's the problem of Klal Yisrael. The Marsha in Shabbos Daf Lamed Aleph points out that the Gemara says that a person, after he lives his years, will have to answer a few questions. Did you kvati item la Torah? Nasos sat b'emuna? Asakti b'pirya v'rivya? Now, that's generally not, sometimes not in a person's hands to be Makayim. A person can have children. So the Marsha seems to be bothered by that question. The Marsha says that the question is, did you get involved and with reading shidduchim? For those that need shidduchim. Now, I wish I had more time to discuss this, but at least let this be a heartfelt appeal. You didn't have to get involved with reading shidduchim. It's taka difficult, and that's why it's a very narrow market. But this is a chiyuv. And these two halachas underscore that obligation. Imagine, you go over to Shatkin, promise him double the amount, you don't have to give him, because he has to do it. Or co-sign a shidduch, but don't worry, the main thing is we have to make shidduchim happen. So that's one halacha we learn from these two halachas to get involved. But beyond that, is there a heter to lie for a shidduch across the board? Not yet. What is an interesting source is actually a Mishnah in Bava Metzia, Daf Samach Amid Beis. On Aleph, I'm sorry. And it's amazing, as we'll see, a sugya like this, there are so many sources in our Torah. We have such a reich Torah, you have to just find it. Listen to a Mishnah. The Mishnah is talking about someone that's selling an Eved, and sagt the Mishnah, Ein Mefarchesin Es Adam. So the Rav on that Mishnah teaches Mesaknin Umeyapin. You're not allowed to, I'll teach the way the first Yisrael teaches, an old Yiddish word, oif putzin. You want to sell an Eved, don't first, dollar him up, like they say, doll him up. Sell him as he is. Now what does that mean? So the Gemara explains, and this is Gepaskin in Choshen Mishpat, Reish Chav Ches Sif Tes, if he's an old Eved, don't first dye his hair, he looks young. Or you're selling an item, don't do it in a way that it looks new if it's really used, because that's the very serious issa of Genei Vazdas. I know. You're selling an old Eved and he looks young. On that Mishnah, the Yavitz in Hagoyis in the back of the Gemara says, but it's Pashit, you're allowed to be mefarches your daughter if you want to marry her off. Shetimtzechein be'einav. Afili cha'ura, even if she's not pretty, you're allowed to do whatever you can to make her look good. And he quotes a Gemara in the Durham, Daf Samach Vav, about a Rabbi Shmuel that wanted to marry off a girl, so the lashon is v'yafuha, he made her look nice. In other words, you're not allowed to oif puts in an eved when you want to sell him, but a child that you want to marry off, you're allowed to do whatever's needed. I mean, I think many people relate to this. You have a son who's a big Talmid Chacham, but you take a look at him and you say, oh, he's not going to get married. You know, every time you see him, he looks like he came right out of the spin cycle of the washing machine. That's the way he looks. He's not going to get married. So what do? You say, come over here. We got to get you ready. You buy a new hat. You buy a new suit. You get him ready. So the Yavitz is saying, Oif puts in an Eved is awesome. Oif puts in a child for a Shidduch is mutter. Then afterwards he adds, but if there's a mum, you can't conceal the mum because Ein Aina Gedoyla Mimenu. And then he adds another example. If an older woman wants to get married and she cannot dye her hair to look young because that's Aina Gedoyla. So here we see a wealth of information. First of all, Genevas Das, Oino, Mekach Tois is real. But the Yavitz seems to be making a chilik. Oif puts in, and the Shidduch is okay. I guess if you know that the meeting is called Basho, so you had to prepare for the show. So a lot of Oif puts in for the show. Oif puts in his mutter, but dyeing hair is awesome. What's the pshat? It's very pashut. Because the boy could look good. Varai, if you put some ice, he looks good. So when you dress him up, that's the real him. Hopefully his wife will make sure he continues to look presentable. But you're not doing anything that's misleading. This is him. You're getting him ready. But to cover over a mum, that you're not correcting the problem, you're concealing the problem. I'll give you an example. A girl goes on a shidduch, she could put on makeup because now she looks good, this is the way she could look. But if she has a terrible blemish and she puts on makeup in a way that it's not noticeable, and after the marriage the chassan's in for a surprise, he has a terrible blemish, so you didn't correct the problem. You concealed the problem. That's no good. So the chilik has to be between preparing for a shidduch, oif puts in, or hiding a chesaron. But we could maybe find a more of a chiddushdika source. In Bava Basra, that Tezayin Amad Aleph, teaching the pasuk in Iyov Leiv Almana Arnin, Gemara says when there was an almana that couldn't find the shidduch, Iyov have a Ozul Shadi Shma Ilavei Bavi Asi Nizasivule. Zok Rashi, he would say, oh, that woman, she's my relative. Oh, she's a Meyucheses, and she got married. Now, how could Iyov lie? It's misleading. I'll say you can't bring a raya from Iyov. Who knows what he did is right? If you look in the Yad Ramah, one of the Rishonim on that Gemara in Bava Basra, Shma mina dechol kai gavna mal yusahi. What Iyov did was actually recommendable. It was a virtue. He did something very good. So here you see l'chayra Iyov lied to make a shidduch. But again, you think about it, it's not a raya. Because really, he wasn't saying anything that this is my daughter, my granddaughter. What he was saying is, I'm going to be there for her. She's my relative. And if you think she's on her own, she's a brachan almana. No. I'm the gadol oimid al gabav. And that was true. He wasn't lying. He was willing to be behind her and support her and be there for her. This I once said a while ago, and I found, I learned the sugya this week. The Divrei Malkiel and Chelik Vav Siman Lamed Beis. This is the volume that was reprinted pretty recently. Someone wrote to the Divrei Malkiel, you're allowed to lie and say you're Meyuchis, you're a Rebbe She'enik of the Dairi Dairis, even though it's not true, from this Gemara in Bava Basra Tezayin. The Malkiel says it's not a raya, but the way he takes it with such a clarity, he says, there's a tremendous maila, someone has a yichus, a zayda, an elta zayda, a father, that means the child's a good child. To say that when it's not true, that's a mekach tois, because you don't have the others that you say you had. Iyov wasn't saying that's my daughter or granddaughter. She's my relative. In other words, I'm keeping an eye on her. And that was true. It's almost like I thought the pshat is. He wasn't saying it's my daughter. So to lie about yichus is taka wrong. But to say that I'm going to be there for her, now how do you say I'm going to be there? She's my relative, Kol Yisrael, Arevim Zel, whatever it is. So it's really not much of a raya l'inyanenu. But what it is, probably the biggest source of all these shilas is an incredible Gemara. I mean, every Gemara is incredible, but the pashtas, if you learn it and you don't focus on it, you miss the point. The Gemara in Yevamos Daf Mem Hey discusses a tragic shaila of an Akama Bal Bas Yisrael, Rahman al-Islam, a guy who was honored with the Yiddish Tachta. So the Gemara is uncertain. What's the status of the child? The child is born, if there's a illicit relationship, a child's a mamza. But this is a guy, it's even worse. So the Gemara paskins, and that's the halacha l'maisa, that the product of an Akam Abal Bas Yisrael, the child is kosher. It's not even a mamza. It's better than even a Eishes Ish V'zanam, because it's not a mamza. So the Gemara has two stories, one to Rabbi Yehuda and one to Rava. That someone came to Rabbi Yehuda, could I marry a regular girl? So he said, yes, but not here, because no one's going to marry you. Go to a different city, no one knows you, and don't reveal your identity, and get married. Both Rabbi Yehuda and Rava recommended this child to do that. What does that mean? You have a problem. You're allowed to hide it? Rabbi Yehuda and Rava were recommending hiding it. But that's just part of the story. The Stipler in Kilas Yaakov in Yevamos Mem Daled, in the old print, it's Siman Lamed Ches, has a real tragic shaila. A bacha underwent a very serious, sensitive surgery, and it's a shaila, is a p'tzua daka or not. Question if he's kosher of a bakol. Lamaisa, the Rabbanan Paskin, he's mutl of a bakol. So he asked the Stipler, do I have to reveal this information? And if I say that word, the shidduch's all over. I won't even get to first base. So the Stipler said, you don't have to say anything. Why? So he says, since the Rabbanan Paskin that you're not posel, you're not posel. I mekach tois gnei vazdas, rayi gedoyle from the Gemara in Yevamos. Gemara in Yevamos also had a serious problem. It's an Akam Bal Bas Yisrael. Frank the Stipler on his chiddush, well, how could this be? No one would want to get into a marriage that the boy had a problem that according to one sheet is a p'tzua daka, but then again the kashtan the Gemara. So the Stipler has a go'inish shavart. If you buy an item in the store and it has a slight defect, you scream, Mekach toys, I want a perfect item. So you're right. Because you don't care which item it is, you want a new item. I don't want a damaged item. If it's not what I wanted, I have a full refund. But Shidduchim, nobody is perfect. Everybody has chesroinus. Now, the real challenge is no one's going to start this shidduch because Akam Bas Yisrael, not for me, or P'tzua Daka, not for me. But once you got to know each other, and the shidduch went, and now after, they look at the big picture. This boy has wonderful milas. But Nebuch, he had a surgery, and hopefully he's okay. Now they won't give it up so quick. When they see the milas, and they got connected, and there's a certain relationship, they enjoy each other's company, says the Stipler. There's an umdana that now they don't want to break it up. So why don't you make the shidduch happen, and that'll be part of the big picture. In other words, you could buy a new item, a perfect item, and therefore if it's not, you claim mekach tois. But there is no perfect shidduch. That's the way the Stipler explains the Gemara, and that's the way he explains his psak. Then he adds a second heta, that here it's not a question of sheker, it's only gnevas das. And the Stipler says you could be soimach on the shittis that gnevas das is only asa midrabanan, and the mitzvah puravu, you're allowed to be over on it. But basically the main heta is this fundamental understanding of the Gemara in Yevamos, that even though in everything else this would be a major mekach tois, but shidduchim, a person has to compromise. You have to be willing to give in. And now that he sees the big picture, Lamafreya wasn't Genevas Das. Now, according to this, I could answer the Kleisenberger's question we began with. We began the question, everybody has chesreinis. How do you draw the line, big or small? I mean, why don't you have to reveal all your chesreinis? I snore at night, this and that. Teretz says, no. That's this Yesod. Everybody has chesreinis. That's part of the leap of faith in marriage. You do what you could do, and you have to understand some things come along with the big milas. But what comes out is that the Steipler is saying even a major chesaron you don't have to say if it won't impact the marriage. Now the problem with this is that this is far from muskam by the other poskim. The Steipler's mechut Rabbi Yosef, and this is printed in the Ha'oros and Kedushin of Ayin Aleph. He says, I had it out with the Steipler on my mechutin, and I said, well, the raya is not a raya. Because the case of Akabah Bas Yisrael, the halacha is clear, the child is kosher. So if it's kosher, what do you want more? But up to a daka, it's a machlekes apoiskim. These are banim paskin is mutter, but there are still sheets that hold it up to a daka. And the emes that divrei makil that I mentioned earlier, way before the Steipler has come out the same shail. I don't know exactly the bechshash, but to a daka. And the shail wanted to compare the Gemara Yavamis, and the divrei makil says it's not a dimyan. Because in the Gemara Yavamis, the child is kosher. You don't like it, so argue with the Rebbeinu Shalom. But Akam Bas Yisrael, the child is kosher. But P'sua Dak, it's a machlokes apoiskim. And you can just say, we paskin, we don't paskin. But it's more of a serious issue. And the second taina, which is really an important taina, is, I saw this, the Rav Sternbuch and Chelik Vav, Reish Sadik Zayin, Sif Katan Yazayin, others say this also, that the Gemara in Yavamis I can understand differently. He told him, go to another city. Now, what happened? He goes to another city, I'm looking for shidduch. Okay, let me marry you. No one asked. So if they don't care, you don't have to care. How can you get married? You don't find out where he comes from? But in the case of P'sua Daka, no one knows his private, personal business. No one went through a harrowing experience. So if they're not supposed to know, how are they expected to even find out? And that's why this taina is a very stark taina. It's in other words, the case of Yavamis is sort of Iyud Afsar Anafshi. They didn't ask about his yichus, so then they don't care. And the third taina, and this also goes before the Steipler, the Imre Yosha, Rabbi Arik in the Chuvas Chelik Beis, the end of Kuf Tez Vav, discusses a problem with that a boy has, and he says the Gemara in Yavamis is not a raya to all cases. Because the Gemara in Yavamis was this boy, Akam Bas Yisrael, product of Akam Bas Yisrael, is going to go to a town and they're going to marry him. He says that I could understand because a girl, Tavla Meisiv Tandu, Isha B'chol Nicha, she's happy any shidduch. That's why you don't have to speak about your yichus, because you have the upper hand, because don't forget it's a boy's market. But if the problem's with the girl, there's no right from the Gemara in Yavamis, you're allowed to conceal information. So the whole Gemara is only talking about the girl that's getting the defect, so to speak. Also, he says, in the Gemara's in Yavamis, the story, it will never be revealed the boy's true identity. So it won't disturb the marriage in any way. So why not? It's not possible. The girl's happy, and it won't have any impact on the marriage. But in the case of a defect in a shidduch that will resurface later, avada you can't say. Now I must mention, avada you mechuyev to say, and you can't reveal, you can't hide that information. Also, what I must mention is even the Steipler that has this big kula is based on part with the fact that Genev is the asin for the Rabbanon. But the Steipler will be moida to make an outright lie, and sheker is still an issa deraisa, even in a world of sheker, but sheker is still a deraisa, there will be no heter. Reb Shlomo Zalman, as it sits Eliezer and Zayin Memtes Gimel quotes it, was surprised about this psak. How could you hide information that will probably be revealed and cause a rift in Shalom Bayis? How could you do such a thing? So Lamaisa, it seems that the Steipler has a chiddush. The Steipler himself concludes this whole simon I wrote, Leheyer u'b'loi iyun haroi va'einenu oima aloch lamaisa v'mayin yifchar. But Rabbi Yaakov Zev, when I think I'm right about this, is we could use the stipler for the first shal that I began. A bacha, a mitzuyin with alamaylas. When he was very young, he had yana machla. He obviously is in full remission because he lived, I think, probably 15 years since then. Does he have to reveal that past history that he had yana machla? So the doctor says he's as healthy as anybody else. Maybe. Everybody's living with maybe, and no one's guaranteed. So this is a chesaron that will not impact the marriage in any way. He doesn't have to ever tell the other side, so they won't even know. And this is something that les man de polig l'chayra, at least Lanias died, he doesn't have to say. It doesn't impact the marriage. And I was happy I found in the Kinei Boisim, it's interesting, that's Meir Bransdorfer, in Chelik Aleph of his Sefer, Simon Kufchaf Aleph, he is very machmir, that you have to reveal every bit of information. And then in Chelik Dalet, Simon Kufchaf, he revisits the question, and he has charata. And he says, if there was a machla, a serious machla, but again, there was a full recovery, don't reveal it. And he says, I have a raya gedoyla, the Gemara in Yavamis, and then he adds a raya, the Sefer Chassidim, that you can't hide information because it's going to end up resurfacing. Is mashma if it won't resurface, so keep quiet. And then he brings our Yavitz. So you see our Torah is geknipt and gebinden, it's all, you have to just put the pieces together. So again, to the first question we began, if there's a problem that has no impact on the marriage whatsoever, you don't have to say. But I must mention that realistically speaking, if the boy had a machla and people knew about it, it might resurface at a later date. What is more recommendable, and I saw this, Rav Moshe, we'll soon see, Rav Shneimber Zalman, the Shevet HaLevi, Rav Sternbach writes this in a number of tshuvas, all say if you have a chesaron that you really don't have to say, but if there's a chance that it will be revealed, then let the couple meet a few times, and once they see that there's a potential, then you could say, by the way, we had a problem, but it's under control. Now, I would be more specific. Don't say, I once had yana machla, because the person will probably faint and there won't be a shidduch to talk to. Come prepared for that meeting. Come prepared with a letter from a doctor, information, exactly what the machla was, exactly why you're convinced it's not a problem. So it's sort of like magdim refuah to the makkah. Let them meet a few times, let the shidduch be on its way, and then you could give this information that seems to be irrelevant. Okay, by Chassidim, there's no few times, you have to do it in a tactful way, but again, like to use the expression, get your foot in the door, and then you could reveal the information. Why? Push it practically. You don't want someone saying, I just heard you were sick once, how you dare not tell me, you violated my trust. So you don't need those type of troubles. But in halacha, a problem that will not impact the marriage in any way, and again, it won't be revealed, halacha, you don't have to say. Now, I also want to mention, because again I have experience with Bnei Torah, sometimes a bacha has a current major chesaron. So the parents decide to play the same game. Let them meet a few times, and then we'll say, experience shows it doesn't help. A real chesaron, a real emotional problem. Let them meet because he looks great, and we'll tell them. It generally does not work. What it does do is destroy the bacha more and more. He goes out, typically 3 times, and then all of a sudden they say no. 3 times, no. If there's a real chesaron, you have to find a specialty shadchan who deals with these chesaronis. But I'm talking about a chesaron that really doesn't affect the marriage, that really is not a problem. If you want to be extra cautious, you will reveal it at a later time, and hopefully the shidduch will go. Now let's discuss a number of other shaylas. First of all, the question about age. So I saw Rabbi Shlomo Zalman is quoted in the Sefer Shalom Bei Simcha. You're not allowed to lie about age. But I must say I did find makilim. Baron Kotler is quoted as saying you're allowed to say the person is 2 years younger than they are. And the chiddush to me is the Heilige Chazanish in Chelik Dalet Reish Chafei Meiser Rav, who said up to 2 years you're allowed to make the boy a little younger. It's not Kitzur Yamim, it's Arichas Yamim. You're giving him extra 2 years. He's back 24. Now, I think the svara is that Lamaisa, the information is totally irrelevant for a shidduch. He's mature enough, right? Maybe a little older, okay? but it's not going to impact the marriage, so why ruin the prospect of a shidduch? Now, if you're talking about an older single, and he might be beyond the childbearing years, so that's a chasar and gadol. But the derech klal, the shidduch, the poskim do give leeway of 2 years. You're allowed to, misrepresent. I find out to say the word lie, but that's what you're allowed to do. Misrepresent the age. If a girl is older than a boy, so let me tell you, give you a clarification. Typically, the boy is older than the girl, which Grada has a makar. The Ramah in the Sefer Mechir Yayin has a Go'ina Shavart. The Gemara says that the Baskal rings out Bas Pliny LePliny. That's inconsistent. It should say Pliny LePlinis or Bas Pliny LeBen Pliny. Zok the Ramah, because typically the boy is older than the girl. So when the boy is a Pliny, she's still a Bas Pliny. She was not yet born because she's not here. So there is a source. But then again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with marrying a girl that is older than you. I'll tell you, a Ma'isa Nifla, Michal Ber Weissman, was 11 years old, and his father took him to visit Rabbi Yosef Jasinski, and they were talking about this child is a girl older than the boy. So the 11-year-old Michal Ber said, I have a raya that there's no problem. So they all listen to Einfeld. The Gemara says Rabbi Yochanan took Reish Lakish for a shvaga. He married Yochanan's daughter. The Gemara says in Kedushin, Lamed Aleph, Rabbi Yochanan never saw his parents. His father died when his mother was expecting, his mother died in childbirth. So if he had a sister, she had to be older than he was. Pashut, right? Because he was born when they both were nifta. The Gemara in Me'ilah Daf Zayin says if Yochanan called Reish Lakish Yenuka, like in America, Sonny Boy, he's much younger. So if Rabbi Yochanan's older sister married Reish Lakish, there had to be an age difference. Now, I once mentioned this concept here, and one of the Yidden Abbach is no longer here, but he told me he knows this story personally. Someone came to Chaim Meir Visionsa, he had a shidduch, a great shidduch, but there's a problem because the girl is older. So the Rebbe says, Rebbetzin, Kim Schnell, come quickly. He goes, what? We have a big problem. He goes, what's the problem? He told me, if the girl's older, it's a problem. You're 4 years older than I am. So we have a problem. If you think about it, his children, his Einiklach now, fear the Welt. I mean, the Belzer Rebbe, the Skler Rebbe, the Satmar Rebbe, and the Visions Rebbe. So he did pretty good with the problem. But the point is that Lamaisa, the age difference is not a problem. I'll tell you one more story to reinforce this. A good friend of mine, his parents have Seichel, and they saw a good shidduch who was older than him, and they didn't tell their own son about her age, just meet them, and it was mamish holding my engagement, and he found out she's older. So he ran to her Pam, what should I do? Everything's great, but the girl's older. So her Pam told him these words, what's a few years in a sea of happy years? And he's still delighting in his sea of happy years. So this is something that has to be mentioned. People say, but how am I going to live hu yimshol ba if she's older? So I told him, and if she's younger, how do you do it anyhow? I haven't figured that out. So let's just keep it as it is. It's a problem that has to be discarded. It's not a problem. That's where maybe you're allowed to lie to the boy. She's younger, but if the shidduch is good, that should not be an issue. Now, Lamaisa, health issues are something, health issues, emotional issues. I'll give you a klal for both of them. Now, one says, Rabbi Yaakov, a certain child says, is there a klal for it? He goes, yeah. The greste klal se wissen as a shidduchim klal. That's a wise statement. Health issues are something that obviously impact the marriage. I know someone, a tire bacha, he married a girl that was terminally ill, and no one told him. And when he was advised to give her a get, she was nifta. I mean, a tragedy, you wonder, what are they thinking? They weren't thinking. There are certain machlas that impact a marriage that can't be concealed. Sometimes people don't know about it. You can't say Iud Afser and Afshe. I'm afraid to mention any names because I'm sure there are people here that have some of these machlas and are doing very well. But the Toivas Sa'inyan, again, it's not a machal that necessarily will shter a marriage, but epilepsy, diabetes, ulcers, Crohn's disease should be disclosed. I'm not saying it's a chesaron. It could be a wonderful marriage, but these things have to be put on the table, and decisions have to be made. Emotional issues are also very challenging because there's a wide range of them. Some very serious ones, there are some mild ones, some past history. Rabbi Yankov's klal is a very good klal, nishdakhan klal. But a person has to do his homework and get a doctor's approval of what the current condition is, and that should be presented, and then a person could make a right decision. Obviously, a problem with having children is a serious problem that has to be clarified very carefully. Now, someone asked, he's allergic to certain foods. So again, that's a chesaron, but it's in context, in the big picture, the Chavetz Chaim says that someone's shvach is not a chesaron, because Talmid Chacham is ktsir umari. So if someone has an allergy to certain foods, okay, many people have allergies. But if there's a serious allergy, I mean, imagine this: the first morning after the chasana, what do you want for breakfast? I made you bread. I have eggs and milk. No, I'm allergic to wheat products, milk products, and egg. What do you want for breakfast? Salmon or steak? Oh. So this is interesting shidduch. Something as serious as that has to be disclosed, but minor allergies, no, you could wait, or as long as you're understanding. Rav Sternbuch in Chelik Aleph Taf Sof Ayin Tes has a shayla, someone either donated a kidney or lost a kidney with one kidney. Again, it's not the end of the world, but that has to be disclosed. I saw an interesting shayla. Shlomo Zalman said if someone has hearing only in one ear, it doesn't have to be mentioned, because he said that Shabina Rav was a cherish in one ear, Kol Yamav, and no one even knew. Now, Lamaisa, that's a chiddush. I saw Antaka Rabbi Yashiv took exception to that, and he said that's a chesaron. Now, it's not a major chesaron. So again, it has to be apprised and to see Taka what really could affect a marriage. I'll tell you, a Chavas Yo'er in Siman Reish Chav has a chiddush nifla, but the girl does not have a sense of smell. I mean, in this matzif, there are people that have this problem. So he says that's an impediment for marriage, because she doesn't know if the food is burning or not. The Gemara says you're allowed to give a get if the woman burns the food. So you can consider that a mum that you have to notify the other party. So again, you think about it, if the boy doesn't have a sense of smell, it's a halbatzar, but if she can't cook, there's a fire in the house, she doesn't know. So again, it has to be really, you have to use a little intellectual honesty as well. I must mention this because it's something that has to be mentioned. If boy or girl have an addiction to technology, lie 100 times, I say never, 100 times over is not enough. How many families were destroyed because of addiction to technology, to internet? This is a chesaron gadol that has to be dealt with, but certainly cannot be concealed. And Re'ez Apel, the Chavetz Chaim, was always so makban on what you're allowed to say. In Siyurim Vav, if there's even a chashash of apikursis, you're mechuyev to say. Because even a chashash, even a small amount, is deadly. And we could definitely say that regarding the evils of technology, how it wreaks havoc on Yiddish homes. Even a chashash of it has to be clarified. This is considered a chesaron atzum that no one is willing to overlook. An interesting question of a bacha or a girl that had past averis, and hopefully they are well beyond that. They are now, their shiras achayim is ashimi sheziknusim mechaperes al yaldusay. So the Minchas Yitzchak Chelik Vav Kuf Lamed Tes says, if indeed they're beyond it, they mamish are totally bali tshuva, you don't have to say. I asked Rapam once, he said, averis, the sigonished. Now this again, we're talking about, if I could use that term, they're full remission. They're way, way beyond any chashash whatsoever. It's only, I just mentioned this, Ramoshe Chelik Dal Kuf Yud Ches and Bemes Rabbi Yashiv, it was insistent in Chelik Aleph Kuf Nun Tes, if Nebuchah Pnuya Shezinsa and she's no longer psula, that has different ramifications, and that information must be revealed. The Minchas Yitzchak Chelik Hey Mem Daled speaks about a child that's adopted, a wonderful child, but they happen to be adopted. So even though there are wonderful children that were raised, adopted, and they're mamish the pe'er of Klal Yisrael, but he does write that information has to be disclosed. If it's not the natural parents, first of all, it definitely will surface. But basically he says this information should be mentioned. But here we could say, like we said earlier, let them meet, see if there's a chemistry, see if there's a potential, and then you could mention it, and then it's part of the decision. Family problems is something that, unfortunately, is a very common shaila. There's a brother that's off the derech, whatever, at risk. So unfortunately, we're holding a situation almost of ein bias asher ein sham, and I'll quote the words of the Helik Sam Seif and Ebenezer Aleph Kuf Yud Gimel: Halei Esav och leYaakov v'Rivka achos Lavan harami v'hi kvoida shleilamda mimaiseyim. If you have just one child, that's not the way it's supposed to be. It's a testament to the greatness of the other children. Look how they persevered. If there's a number of children, so that's a tzarachian. But basically, the fact that there's a child off the derech is not information that will impact the shidduch or the medubah. The Paiskim say another interesting. Hopefully, this is. Unfortunately, I should say this is a common shaila. There was a grandfather that was affected by the war, and his ashkafas were, destroyed. But that's something that we can't blame those that went through the Mechama. So these are exceptional cases, but derech klal apikursis is a problem, but you have to know what's considered a question of apikursis. The Yesher B'Yashiv once, the boy knows that his parents have shalom bayis issues. Of course, the girl doesn't know. So with typical chachma, he said, if no one knows about the problem, so it won't affect the marriage. If it's a big enough problem that it will affect the marriage, you can know others know about it also. So if others know about it, they have to find out. Not your job. So that's something that basically, which is a truth, if there is a serious shalom bayis issue, you could be sure that others know about it also, and the other side will find out about it. If the boy or girl were once engaged, and it was a short engagement, it's a broken engagement, so that, I did see the Reb Shlomo Zalman, and this is quoted in the Mevakshei Torah Chav Gimel Amud Tes, that's an inyan chama ma'od. You have to use a lot of seichel how and when to divulge that information. Because very often, a boy or girl fell into a terrible shidduch. They found out in time. They broke the shidduch. It's no fault of theirs at all. Sometimes it is their fault. So when you tell someone, oh, he's a great boy, but he had a broken engagement, there goes the shidduch. So you have to know when to say it and how to say it. But basically, here's where we'll use that eitzah. Let them meet a few times, and then when you see this potential, you can say, by the way, there was a broken engagement, I happen to know, I spoke to this Rav, and you do your homework and present a finished product, a finished report about the problem. If the boy or girl were divorced, they were married a short time, that of course you have to say, or Moshe in Chelik Dalet, Even Ezlam, but Beis Dalet, of course you have to say that for many reasons. The last group of questions are when a person wants to be sort of proactive and do something misleading. I'll tell you a ma'aseh d'shahaya. There was a boy that was very overweight, and he decided a little before he started Shidduchim, he went on a crash diet, and now he looks wonderful. But, as he told me, don't worry, I'll get my nekama. He's daitei lachzar, like I quote halacha. So that is wrong. Not advisable, and shalei al pi halacha, because I must say, obesity is a sakana. Someone showed me an article. The second most common cause of preventable deaths in America is overeating. Pachad. Rapam once struggled to get these words out of his mouth. He said, people are not careful what they eat; they dig their graves with their own teeth. That wasn't his type of talk, but that's a concept that has to be taught to Bachrim. So he's overweight, and he's just doing it to get married, and right after the chuppah, he's going to back, to his old ways. That's how it will definitely have a detrimental, if not devastating, effect. But if someone loses weight seriously and they keep it off, you should know it's a tremendous maila of a person that does it. But that's something that's fine. But to do it with it's mamish daite lachza, that's a genevas das, that avada will have a big impact on the marriage. People are going to be upset. How'd you do this? An older bacha dyeing his hair to look younger, of course, is obviously a problem. The question is, a younger boy that has a blotch of gray, or he grayed prematurely. So you have to realize there are two different questions here. Because there's a question of genevas das. An older boy dyes his hair, looks like a young boy, he's fooling people. Even the young bacha, who is young, dyeing his hair is not genevas das because he's young. But there's another issue of la yilbash. So la yilbash is a share for itself. But one thing is clear, that the older person dyeing his hair just to look younger, that we saw earlier from the Yavitz. The Yavitz says for a Zekain to dye hair is awesome. And there's a source way before the Yavitz, the Sefer Chassidim, in Siman Shin Ayin Tes. Someone advised someone, there's a great shidduch in a different city, but you're much older than her, just dye your hair and go get married to her. And his response was, Chalili lahatais oisa elatira shani zokein. I will not do that. I'm old, let her know I'm old. So no doubt about it, dying here of an older person just to look younger is a genevas das. It's a no, genevas das. The other question, a bacha, a young bacha, but he looks unsightly with a little bit gray. So then you come to the shaila of la yilbash. So you look in the Ma'aseh Ish of the Chazon Ish, Aleph Kuf Samach Zayin, the Chazon Ish refused to be mekel. So the Ben Torah doesn't do that because it's a shaila of la yilbash. Now some hold you're not doing it to look nice, you're doing it to get a shidduch. The Divrei Chaim and Yeridei Chelik Beis Simon Samach Beis, can you do a shaila where a person half his hair and beard turned gray, a young person? The Chaim would not be mekel. So you do it. The Chaim was very makbid la yilbash. I saw the Chalkas Yankov and Yeridei Pei Zayin. Someone said, for shidduch, I'm allowed to die, I'm young. He says, but why are you dying here? To look good. That's la yilbash. You know, you say you're doing it for shidduch, I'm saying you're doing it to look good. That's la yilbash. So there might be rabbanim that are mekel l'tzarech shidduch, but that's only when there's no genevas das. If the person taka is old, misrepresenting himself is a question of genevas das. We saw a shaila about a girl, it wasn't an older girl, but the boy didn't like the color hair. I don't want to say the color because some people had that color hair, but he didn't like that color hair. So she wanted to dye her hair a different color. So this is a much easier shaila to deal with. There's no question of genevas das because she's young. There's no question of the yilbash for a girl. But the question is, what are you going to do after your marriage? So she says she will never go with uncovered hair in the house. So the Emes says, if indeed she'll be careful to keep the color hair that she dyed it, kol yomeha, so what's the problem? But you have to realize one more thing, that if he finds out that he married someone with the color that he strongly dislikes, you know, he's in for a surprise and you're in for a surprise. So it might be kedai to say, listen, I treated it and you see, I fooled you, the first few times we met, but certainly before the shidduch is consummated, it's kedai to mention it. Ma'aseh Shahaya, I'm going to give you a feeling of how the poskim were careful with this shaila. A girl lost her hair, not because of a machla, not because of treatment to a machla, but she had a hair loss. And the parents invested in a human hair sheitel, which grad there's no shaila for a psula. So everybody agrees it's mutter. And she looks as good as she always looked. The doctor says after 3 or 4 years, the hair will grow back. But in the interim, she has to wear this toupee, the sheitel. Now she's holding by a shidduch, so she has to tell the boy that there's not a natural hair. And she said she comes from a family, they don't uncover the hair even in the house. And there's no, the husband won't see her all of a sudden, suddenly without any hair. So Rav Vosden Chelik Vav, Siman Reish Hey, he discusses, first of all, if baldness is a mum, because if it's a mum, then it's a mekach tois. Forget about whether he cares or not, it's a mekach tois. And then he says, by an isha it's a mum gomer, and if by kanem it's a mum gomer, and it says, also, halev noita lahach medava godol, something like this, he says, it's not advisable, tzarech ian godol lahakol. They're talking about a sheitel that obviously is very good looking, but you don't fool people in a shidduch. Then he says, but I would advise you to let them meet a few times, and after they meet and it's going good, then you could say, this is a temporary problem. Again, come with the information clear. It's not a machla, it's not from yena machla, it has a machla, but that will definitely grow back. We had a shaila where a boy was very short, and he wanted to wear shoes that have high heels. So I must mention, short person is not a chisaron. He asked the Chazon Ish once, so he said, diamonds are also small. Or a different time he said, they asked him, the boy is short. He goes, 1 second, could you count him into minyan? Is he there? I mean, is he invisible? Okay, but if he's there. And the third time he said, many Gedolei Yisrael were short. And we was like Moshe Feinstein, Baron Kotler was shorter than his Rebbetzin. So I'm not accepting that it's a problem. But the boy was worried. So I saw Rav Nissen Karel's in the Chut Hashani, Hilchas Mezuzah, Amit Shin, has a story that someone came to Mrs. Zalman. He wanted to wear high heels, but it's a question of Genevas Das. So Mrs. Zalman had a Lamdasha approach. He said, she wants a tall boy. With the high heels, you look tall. So what's wrong? So Rav Aaron Cohen, Mrs. Zalman's nephew, says, no. because she thinks you are the way you are, and with high heels you'll be even taller, and she wants that. So Mr. Kabbalah says Islam Mels is right, because if she's already thinking about him wearing high heels, so she should look now if he's already wearing high heels. So either afsir or nafsir. And one last question. Someone asked me, he has glasses, but he doesn't look good in glasses. Could he wear contacts? But he needs some type of prescription. So I think here we come to our original yisoid. Oiv puts in versus misleading. I think it's common knowledge that people have glasses and some people wear contacts. A girl or boy that wears contacts is not hiding their need for glasses. If the boy has a very, very high prescription, and with glasses, it's obvious it looks like he's wearing something that's mamish magnifying glasses, and it's obvious and he's trying to hide it by wearing contacts. That's an issue. If he has an unusually bad eyesight, but if it's normal eyesight, or like what you need glasses for it, that's basically oif puts in. And again, hopefully we should all be zoicha to Shidduchim and make the Shidduchim Shatayva Matzlachas. A good talk to you all.
I'd like to thank Rabbi Smith for the wonderful shiur, and everybody should make a lot of Shidduchim. Rabbi said this summer shiurim, it's like between winter and summer. We have Rabbi Smith's shiur already back, but we're having also the summer shiurim this whole week, Bar Park, Williamsburg, and Flatbush, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evening. Tomorrow night, Monday night, Rabbi Smith will be speaking in Flatbush in the Boston Shul 9 o'clock. There will be the shiurim here 9:30 every single night, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. The dinner Wegen Sheter, which was supposed to be this Wednesday in Flatbush, is being pushed off in a few weeks, Be'ez Hashem, Siyat L'Shemai in Barapak, because of the Eibishter Tazay Gewalt, the COVID. So in Flatbush, we can't make it this Wednesday. We'll have it Be'ez Hashem in Barapak in a few weeks. We don't want to give out the information yet, but we're asking everybody to please participate by sponsoring a shiur, helping English Torah's Abatza Torah all over the world, taking an ad in the journal. Call English Torah office right now at 718-851-8651, or email to irgun@yeshivanet.com. You have a chelik in the Abatza Torah all over the world, or come to one of the Askanim right now to be sponsored a shiur, give you a check donation or credit card. לפיכך הרבה להם את המצווה שנאמר ונחפש מן צדקה יגדל תורה ויעדר. אמן.
Ready?
Yeah. Sikum.
So how we doing? Tuesday, next time. Tuesday. Like, no. Yeah, don't. You're not invited.
Sikum.
I don't know if you got the invitation. I could be sent the older. No. How are you? Good.
It's the second time we're in the sun.
Yeah. Usually, wait.
Because I seek him today, 5 minutes.
It's hard to give a sikkim today, but it's important. First of all, every question of shidduch is a question of dairos, and it's best to ask a shayla, or best to remember the klal is no klal. But one thing we could say, that things that the other party could find out on their own, that's common knowledge. The Chavetz Chaim seems to say, you're not mechuyev to come and say, I have this problem, that problem. Things that are common knowledge, the other mechutin has to find out, do his homework, and if not, it's a sov of a kibbul. But derech klal, there's no heter to lie. I think that's pretty much a klal. We saw regarding age, but even that you should clarify. It's something that they're going to find out. They have date of birth, and it's 2 years your date of birth, and what but the truth is 2 years off. But to start a shidduch, they're possibly allowed to not divulge the right age. Things that there's a real resentment, it's best to disclose it, because even if you didn't say it, they're going to find out. And again, a major problem of shalom bayis when the parties find out afterwards, how did you not tell me? How did you do this to me? So it's best to start something, and then the rest you'll clarify when it gets closer. If you're dealing with a Ramai, like Lavan, like Eliezer Ram with Lavan, then there's certain heterim, mikesh tispatol, it's not sheker, but b'derech klal with erlecha people, you have to go with the emes. We mentioned the importance of reading Shidduchim, although we could stress that more. Today it's a Shidduch crisis, people have to get involved. There's a very big difference between oif puts in, which means making them presentable or fooling, hiding a chesaron, or removing a chesaron by dressing up the boy or girl properly. The Gemara in Bava Basra, Eoy did not say that she's my child or grandchild. He says, I'm connected to her, and if I'm going to support her, which was true, so I wasn't really lying. The real issue is the Gemara in Yevamis, where the Gemara says an Eved, a child of an Akam Bas Yisrael, does not have to disclose his yichus, and it seems the heta of that Gemara is limited. It's only because it's kosher l'chol hadayis, it won't affect the marriage, because it's a good boy, and most importantly, the other party will not find out that their mechutin was a guy. So then, in that case, the Gemara is matir to go make a shidduch without disclosing the information. But if there's a serious problem and say, well, I got a psak rav that it's not a problem. If other rabbanim hold it's a problem, that problem should be presented again in the right time. A child when he was young, he was sick, but now he's in full remission. That shidduch could be a good shidduch and does not have to be disclosed until a little later. The age, at most 2 year difference, they're allowed to say 2 years younger than the person is. A girl older than a boy is not a chesaron. Health issues, emotional issues, but their klal should be revealed at some time. Allergic to foods, depending what type of foods, if it doesn't really disturb the normal flow of marriage, it doesn't have to be shared if it's a problem. Of course it should be. One kidney or hearing in one ear is enough of a problem that has to be revealed. They lost a sense of smell. Again, that's something that for a woman is a problem. An addiction to anything, whether it's technology, of course drinking or smoking, is a problem that has to be stopped, but certainly has to be mentioned during a shidduch. I should have mentioned, and someone pointed out to me, in Eitz Tova, when the mechutana meet, so the mechutan that's concerned, and we all should be concerned, should say, listen, my child is 100% perfect. Can you say the same about your child? I want 100% perfect, healthy child. If there's hemming and hawing, you know that there's a tzarachian. But once you do that, at least you get the information that you need without compromising on health or emotional issues. An adopted child is a good child, but it should be told. A sibling off the derech is unfortunate, but doesn't impact the marriage. That's not the information that has to be shared. Shalom bayis issues in the family or even in the parents, if it's not something that will disturb the marriage, does not have to be disclosed. A broken engagement should be told at the right time. Overweight, and a person just lost weight just for the shidduch, is a form of deceit that's unacceptable. Dyeing hair to look young is a problem. Dyeing hair, the girl dyeing hair, that's not a problem of la yilbash. But again, you have to be careful that it should not be violating the confidence of the other party. And high heels is not a problem. Contact lenses, but their klal is also not an issue that has to be revealed.